Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says government eases a slew of restrictions, malls, religious places to open. The government of India had imposed a nationwide lockdown. This was imposed to prevent the spread of the COVID 19 infection. We had lockdown 1 and 2, where economic activities were suspended, and what we had was essential services that were being supplied. Then we had lockdown 3.0, where some sections of the economic activities were opened. Then we have lockdown 4.0, where further liberalization of economic activities were initiated. Now, what we have is the new guidelines called as Unlock 1.0. What is this Unlock 1.0? All those sectors which were once prevented in multiple lockdowns will now be opened up, and there will be resumption of the economic activity. So, what are the sectors that will be opened up, and what are the sectors that will be opened eventually down the lane is what is the gist of this article. First, let us understand about the red, orange and green zones. When you look at the red, orange and green zones, you had all these segmentation that was prevailing in lockdown 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now this particular zoning of red, green and orange will be removed. So the central government has removed this, but it has also given permissions to the state government that they would be able to regulate what is called as containment zones. When it comes to the containment zones, let's say there is a particular region where there is sudden spike of the incidents. In this particular region, the state government would be able to demarcate it with the support of the local administration, and they would be able to regulate the movement in the containment zone. But this will require prior publicity in case of implementation. So who would be able to impose it? It is the state government. So this zoning of red, orange and green will be removed, and only the containment zones where there is increase in the spike of the incidents can be regulated by the state government. Now let's see what will be unlocked completely. From June 1, we will not have the red, orange and green zones. Lockdown only in the containment areas as we just discussed. No more permit system for the interstate movement of vehicles. They need not have to seek permissions from the state governments as well as from the other local authorities. No restriction on movement within and outside the state. From June 8th, malls, restaurants and religious practices will be opened except in the containment zones. Then in July, a decision will also be made to reopen schools and other educational institutions. As of now, no decision with respect to opening of schools and other educational institutions have been made. What will not be allowed? What are the sectors that will not be allowed to operate? This will include bars, gymnasiums, entertainment, parks and cinema halls, metro rail and international air travel. Advisory is also issued where night curfew for all non-essential activities will continue from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Face masks and social distancing are mandatory, and work from home wherever it can be provided and implemented should be given is some of the directives issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Apart from this, when it comes to the marriage, the same restrictions are imposed that only 50 people would be able to attend, and in case of funerals there could be a restriction which would be capped to about 20 people. Spitting in public is still an offense, and these people can be penalized under the Disaster Management Act of 2005. This is just a quick run up to this Unlock 1.0. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says High Court questions State Election Commissioner's appointment. What is this article all about with respect to its background has been explained on 14th of April 2020 under the fifth topic, sacking by subterfuge. So kindly look into it. What are we discussing now? We will be looking at what is the update with respect to the High Court ruling. Let me give you a brief background. Ramesh Kumar was the state election commissioner in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Local elections were to be conducted where it was assumed that the ruling party might win. But what happens? There was sudden postpone of this local elections. Why? Because of the COVID-19 infections. And as a result, there was a need for taking some safety measures. So this was postponed indefinitely. But the ruling party dispensation believed that this particular idea of postponing was taken because this person, that is the state election commissioner, was appointed by the opposition political party which was previously in power. That is when they realized that this person has to be removed. They came up with an ordinance. They came up with an ordinance to remove the state election commissioner, and that is when he was removed and a new state election commissioner was appointed. As a result of this sudden removal of the state election commissioner, the state election commissioner, that is Ramesh Kumar, approached the High Court. He said that the terms and conditions and what has been the constitutional mandate has been violated, and that is the reason he approaches the High Court of Andhra Pradesh. So the High Court of Andhra Pradesh looks into this particular case, and it has now directed the state government to reinstate Ramesh Kumar as the state election commissioner. What did the High Court of Andhra Pradesh say? The High Court of Andhra Pradesh clearly said that this is an abuse of power. What was the rationale of coming up with this ordinance? There was no exigency in the present scenario. So this has been an abuse of power with no test of rationality that is qualified. The state government came up with an argument that it wanted to bring about electoral reforms, that it wanted to bring changes in the way the election commissioner was appointed. This is where the High Court steps in, and it says that you have appointed one of the persons as the state election commissioner. He happens to be a person whose age is about 77 years of age, but ideally any election commissioner will not be employed after 65 years of age. So if this is what you consider as electoral reform, that is a violation of the Constitution of India. So you have been using this particular power to raise an ordinance, and you have violated the Constitution of India, and that is why we are striking this particular ordinance, and you have to reinstate the original state election commissioner, that is Ramesh Kumar. So this particular ordinance, which has been introduced by the government of Andhra Pradesh, is hence nullified. It has asked the government of Andhra Pradesh to reappoint Ramesh Kumar so that he can fulfill all the criteria and the completion of 5 years. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says PM cares not within the ambit of RTA Act, says the PMO. The Prime Minister had come up with the PM Cares Fund. What does it stand for? It stands for the Prime Minister Citizen Assistance and Relief in Emergency Situation. This was a call given by the Prime Minister to make voluntary contributions towards this particular fund. The people of India stood up for the cause and they made voluntary contributions. The fund that is accumulated in this particular coffer will be used to provide relief during the COVID-19 pandemic and in case of any future emergencies like the COVID-19 pandemic. But then came couple of questions. We already had the presence of Prime Minister National Relief Fund. So what was the need of Prime Minister Care? Then what was the law that was used to come up with such a mandate? If it is a trust, where is the trust deed? What is the government order? What are the various notifications and what are the various circulars relating to its creation and its operations? How is it being used? Who is using it? How is the money being diverted? And for what is this particular money being used? These were some of the questions that needed answers, and that is why a right to information application was filed. Now the Prime Minister's office has come up with a reply. It has said that Prime Minister's office does not come under the definition of public authority. Hence, we cannot reveal the information as per the right to information. So now the question is, what does the definition of public authority include? By section 2 of which it includes that which is established under the Constitution of India. Let's say we have the Election Commission. Let's say we have the UPSC. Was this established by the Constitution of India? Such bodies, such parties will come under the definition of right to information. Then what we have is a law made by the Parliament. If there is a law that is made by the Parliament of India with respect to RTA information, all these laws that have been passed by the Parliament, they have to reveal information with respect to the government activities. Then we have any other law made by the state legislature. Like the Parliament, the state also has the legislative role in case they pass a particular act, and if there are authorities that are falling under this act, they will have to reveal the information with respect to the governmental activities by notification issued or order made by the appropriate government, that is a body owned, controlled or substantially financed by the government. It can be corporations, it can be municipalities, it can also be the local panchayat operations as well. Non-governmental organizations substantially financed directly or indirectly by funds provided by the appropriate government. If there are non-governmental organizations which are taking money from the government of India, such non-governmental organizations will also fall under the ambit of public authority. Now the question is, does PM CARES fall under the definition of the RTA Act under public authority? No, says the PMO. It does not fall under the definition of public authority. Hence, they say that they'll not be revealing any information in the near future. Now that the Prime Minister's office has not called this PM CARES under the public authority, it raises multiple questions. It raises multiple concerns and fears and apprehensions. What are these? By denying PM CARES under the status of public authority, a question comes: who is controlling it? If it is not the government, then who is controlling this particular fund? So if it is not the government authority or that which falls under the public authority definition, who is controlling it is the major question being asked. Then what we have is, because this fund does not have the transparency, because we do not know how the fund is being operated, if the fund is being misused, now the question is, what about the transparency which the right to information always espouses for? Because this particular fund does not have all these major aspects, this means there is lack of transparency with respect to the Prime Minister CARES. Followed by this, what we have is the Prime Minister, who happens to be the chief ex officio chairman of the trust. It is also assisted by 3 cabinet ministers. If there are people like Prime Minister, 3 cabinet ministers, denying this particular status of public authority to PM CARES is a questionable blow to transparency, and this ultimately violates the democratic values, is what this article all about. We will have an elaborate analysis of this lecture once again, as we will have more editorials and columns tomorrow and day after. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Delhi High Court wraps Telegram on Jagran e-paper road. What is this Telegram? As we are all aware, like WhatsApp, it is another multi-messaging platform tool which was founded by Russian entrepreneur Pavel Durov. We send messages on WhatsApp, call them, send documents, send videos, and do multiple things with WhatsApp. The same can also be worked about with Telegram as well. One of the unique things about Telegram is what we call as channel. So what is this channel? We have groups on our WhatsApp. A similar one is what is called as channels on the Telegram. These channels can have admin credentials where multiple people can control it, and it can also be one admin channel where they can send information on a one-side way. This channel of late has come into a controversy. Why? It has come into controversy because lot of pirated content are being sold on these channels. What does the pirated content include? This include books written by authors, films which are made by the filmmakers, and it also includes multiple other documents which happens to be the intellectual property rights of few writers as well as filmmakers. Added to this app has been used to circulate large-scale obscene and vulgar sexual content featuring women as well as children. The Telegram has also been widely used among terrorist groups like the ISIS as well. These channels are now being used to push across all these messages as well as documentations. Why does this continue? While we are able to regulate social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook and messaging platforms like WhatsApp, why are we not able to do the same with respect to Telegram? That is because Telegram as a platform offers increased anonymity, and at the same time, because of the end-to-end encryption, there could be a possibility we do not know who owns this channel. Apart from this, people also prefer Telegram as a platform because this platform provides large storage for the people to send their videos and documents on this channel through the Telegram. This is where the present scenario steps in. Jagran Prakashan Limited has filed a case in the Delhi High Court where it has said that Telegram has allowed its users create channel and they are sharing some of the e-papers, which is creating financial losses to this company and at the same time violating the trademark rights of this company Jagran Prakashan. So Jagran Prakashan has said that usually what happens is that it has its e-papers, subscribers will have to pay for it and only then subscribe and use this particular e-paper. But this e-paper has been taken by anonymous user and he has been circulating it free of cost, which is creating financial losses for the company. This is where this company has requested the Delhi High Court to issue certain orders. The Delhi High Court has now issued a directive where it has asked the Telegram to disclose the identity of the user who has created this channel and is circulating this ePDF and ultimately creating losses to this company. The High Court has also directed Telegram to take down all those channels who were indulging in similar copyright infringement activities against this very company, leading to the financial losses as well as copyright violations. How do we overcome this issue? Apart from the court directives, what could be introduced as a policy change? One such example can be imported from European Union Directive on Copyright. What is this European Union Directive on Copyright? They have introduced or come up with what is called as Article 13. This requires all the platforms like YouTube, Facebook, or any other messaging apps like WhatsApp, or even for example Telegram as well. In case there is a user who happens to upload a particular content, this content will have to be filtered out in case there is any copyright violation. So before it is being uploaded on the social media or it is being sent to another person, there should be a software that should be embedded by these social media platforms or the messaging platform to check for the content. In case the content is a violation of copyright, it should be immediately deleted, and if it does not violate it, such should be uploaded. This is one of the important recommendations given by the European Union. So basically what it will do is it will act like an upload filter that will scan all the user content before it is uploaded to sites to remove the copyrighted material. The same can also be implemented by India and many other countries to prevent this pirated content from being distributed. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says draft e-commerce policy for comment soon. In India, e-commerce is one of the fastest growing industry. It's also an industry that is ever changing. People are being pulled towards this platform because of discounts that are being given, because of competition that is present, because of options that they have to pick it up from. So the people have the major advantages. This is not all. There are people who have concerns as well. There are brick and mortar shops who are suffering because of huge discounts given by these online platforms. The small shops, the small clothing companies, the small shoe companies are the major sufferers. In order to balance the customer benefits and the benefits for the business people, a commerce policy is the need of the hour. So that is what this article all about. So the government of India, that is the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, is planning to come up with a draft e-commerce policy. This draft e-commerce policy will look at three sectors. One is with respect to the platform like the Amazon, like Flipkart, or any other platform. Then it looks into the consumer's importance as well. And finally, it will also look at those businesses who have been the major sufferers because of the discounts given by the online platform. All these people are the major stakeholders. Their viewpoints will be considered, and ultimately a e-commerce policy will be coming out, and all the viewpoints of these stakeholders will be considered as well. Now the question is, what would be the e-commerce policy? This will basically try to understand what is data. So data here is I give the information to Amazon. So when I give my credentials, my name to it, my credit card number to it, my house details to it, this is what is data. So I as a consumer am giving data to these online platforms. That is what is called as data. So what are the online platforms supposed to do with it? This is a data that I've given. So it also means I've trusted Amazon and I've given them. It also means that there is importance of privacy. In case they breach my privacy, what will be the implications because of it? First thing that they have to do is define what is the data and what is the purpose of this particular data. What are the commercial benefits of this particular data? Are these data being sent to some other country or to some other company? All that will be looked into under this e-commerce policy. And at the same time, from the consumer end, they will also look at whether these platforms are always giving genuine products or counterfeit products. Are they the ones which will have the lifetime, or it will be corrupted in a few days? So secondly, so there are some products which are inferior in nature, which is a major problem for the customers. Such inferior inferior products, counterfeit products will have to be looked into, and the safety of the consumers will have to be ensured. By ensuring a policy change, what we are doing is protecting the rights of the consumers, and at the same time this should not be a losses to the businesses, so their viewpoints will also be considered, is what this e-commerce policy is. As of now, we do not have the clear-cut features of this. Once we have all of this, we will have an elaborate analysis for the same. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a few infected people account for large virus spread, and this is speaking about super spreading event. What is this super spreading event? Let's say there is an individual X. This individual X might be a person who's asymptomatic with respect to COVID-19, or he might be symptomatic with respect to COVID-19. This person happens to go to an event. It can be a wedding, it can be a birthday bash, or it can be a party or any religious gathering. This person does not know that he has COVID-19, or he might know, but still he wants to go to this event. Once he goes to this event, if a single person happens to infect as many as 10 or 20 or 30 or many people, that is what is called as super spreading event. There is an event and this single person has spread to multiple number of people, and that is why it is called as super spreading event. The term super spreader refers to that particular person who spreads a disease to a larger number of people. How do super spreading events happen? An infected person happens to be at a point of his illness where he is able to transmit this particular disease. So I as a person may not transmit it if I don't have it, but if there is a person who has certain symptoms, or he does not know that he has symptoms but he is asymptomatic, but he is capable of spreading this particular disease, and if he happens to enter that particular event, then he is spreading this particular disease. And also note, such places where people are densely packed, they are more engaging in something and they happen to more breathe and sing and engage in their activity, such is the place where super spreading happens according to this article. What are some of the examples? There was a choir practice in church in Mount Vernon, Washington, in which 61 people participated. One person who had apparently non-specific symptoms ended up infecting 53 choir members. Then we have the church outbreak in South Korea and Singapore, Zumba classes in South Korea causing 65 cases, and when it comes to India, we have the Tablighi Jamaat in Delhi and Coimbatore market in Chennai, which happened to spread to multiple number of people. Such is the example and is an example for super spreading event. How do we prevent such super spreading events? Major thing is social distancing norms have to be practiced. Many places will have to reduce the densely populated crowd, and what we have to ensure is wearing mask, changing seating layouts, and also install good ventilation in that particular place. So these are some of the precautionary measures that one would be able to take to prevent the super spreader events. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements with respect to Right to Information Act. NRIs cannot file RTI applications. RTI Act mandates every public authority to provide as much information suo motu to the public at regular intervals. Obtaining information under RTI is free of cost for all. Which of the above statements is or correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why? NRIs can also file the RTI application, and at the same time obtaining information under RTI is not free of cost. They have to pay charges as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. Factors influencing the onset of southwest monsoons include intense low pressure formation over Tibetan Plateau, permanent high pressure cell in south of Indian Ocean, subtropical jet stream, African easterly jet, and intertropical convergence zone. The correct code is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about Bar Council of India. It is an extra constitutional body. They set standards for legal education and grants recognition to universities whose degree in law will serve as qualification for enrollment as an advocate. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is both. It is an extra constitutional body. Why? Because this is not mentioned in the Constitution of India. Kindly remember, This is a statutory body. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Velayani Lake is in the state of? It is in the state of Kerala. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article, and it is in the state of Kerala. This Velayani Lake happens to be the largest freshwater lake in Thiruvananthapuram, and it happens to be the second largest freshwater lake in the state of Kerala. The lake at present caters to drinking water needs of all the local people in this region. Now let's look into the next practice question. In the Mekong Ganga Cooperation, an initiative of 6 countries, which of the following is not a participant or participants? It includes Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, Myanmar and Thailand. Select the correct answer. The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Bangladesh and China are not part of the Mekong Ganga Cooperation. So who are the member countries? It includes India, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand and Vietnam. Now let's look into the mains questions. Today we have the essay that you guys will have to write. So please write the essays. Restructuring global institutions to reflect the global realities. This is reference to the World Health Organizations and the changes that the global institutions will have to comply by. Next essay, righteousness is the foundation stone of peace and governance. This can be in terms of relationship between India and Nepal. It can also be between multiple other countries as well. So this is one such example. You can add in multiple other perspectives to it. So please write all your answers on the comment section so that you guys can have a peer review and also come up with constructive criticism. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.